All right. Hello. We have finally started. My name is Sam Irvin. This is Asheville 8 p.m. Note. I think I usually introduce that in reverse. This is Asheville 8 parentheses p.m. end parentheses note. It's usually a live stream, but I'm going to call it a broadcast because today's episode is pre-recorded. And this podcast broadcast is coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina, my home studio, Irvin Music Studio, where I teach private lessons, rehearse for performances. I do a lot of event entertainment for weddings and corporate events and stuff like that, playing primarily classical guitar, string combos, or jazz ensembles, play trumpet and stuff. And I also do some production stuff, including this live stream. A lot of AV equipment, audio visual equipment, just in case you need that spelled out. To keep track of here, a lot of cables were causing us issues as I was setting up for this. I say us because my guest tonight is Ryan Kijanka. Is that how you pronounce your last name? Kijanka? Okay, great. A stand-up guy, a stand-up bass player, a busy dude around town, a fellow teacher at Asheville Music School with me. And as we do on every episode, we're going to jam for an hour and then chat for an hour. No, that's in reverse as well. We're going to chat for an hour and then jam for an hour, such as the format of this podcast broadcast. I started this to carve out a little time in my life to just have fun, to play music for fun rather than grinding on it. Creativity for creativity's sake, if you will. And I also wanted to build community. You know, it's a great excuse to catch up with old friends like Ryan Kijanka, who I've known for a long time, but still needed to double check how to pronounce his last name. Sometimes I'm meeting brand new people. Tomorrow, although I guess this is being released much later, so it's not tomorrow for you, but tomorrow I'm meeting a new violinist friend who is a friend of the other guest that's coming on. I'm pretty excited about, I guess one's a viola player and one's a violin player. And to me, that seems like a slight difference, but I guess I'll learn more in depth about what the differences between those two instruments are. The viola is slightly lower, right? Getting a nod from Ryan Kijanka. But I'm excited to meet her. I've met a lot of great people on here. This is episode... Well, actually, I'm not sure. When I release it, it'll be episode like 60, maybe. Yeah, we're up there. So yes, I do this for fun, for community, and to, work on my audiovisual skills and showcase the studio, explore and make weird sounds, and really try to produce something nice. Sometimes it's a challenge trying to make sure all these channels are going to the right place. But hopefully there's going to be a killer sound. Hopefully I sound really nice and sultry right now. Yeah, getting more nods from the current engineer. But he's about to take off the engineer hat and put on his co-host hat, because this is more of a conversation than an interview spot. Everybody, Ryan Kijanka. Please join me. I really need to get like an applause track as well.
Carefully not. Be careful with all these wires.
Yes, you've passed the first test.
I made it.
Yeah. No, I should have warned you about this shorter stool too.
I know. This is usually opposite.
That's true. You are much taller than me. It's my turn to shine though.
Yeah. But you deserve it with all this stuff.
Yeah. Me having a lot of stuff mainly,
and is offering a creative space. That's
right.
That's a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you for helping me fill it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so now's your chance. You've got a platform. What do you want to say to the world?
What do I want to say to the world?
Yeah.
Offer more creative spaces. Create more creative spaces.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You're certainly I would love a taxonomy of the musical projects that you're involved in. I know you're heavily involved with Sirius B, a band in town. Franklin Keel has been on. I'm wondering if anybody else from that band has been on yet, because it's kind of large, right?
Yeah. Have you had Drayton Aldridge?
Drayton Aldridge has been on.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's in the band when he's around. He's in the band because he kind of seems like every few months he's in a different state, living somewhere, and then he's back, and then he's in the band, and then he's gone, and then he's back and takes all of our gigs, and then he's gone. So, But yeah, so Sirius B is not been quite as active since the year all gigs ceased to exist for a little while.
Yeah.
But no, that's nice.
Yeah. I only ever remember to do it
when you're sitting here. Yeah, so Sirius B has been actually one of I think it's been the longest band I've been in, actually probably ever, but definitely since I've been to Asheville. I met Franklin. So another person that you've had on that I play with often is Dan Keller. And
what a beast.
Yes, incredible guitar player. Got the best laugh in the world. Most contagious. Yep. Yeah. And an incredible person. When I first moved to town about 10 years ago now, I met him. He called me for a gig at Southern Appalachian Brewery in Hendersonville. And that was the first Sunday of the month. And I had that gig ongoing pretty much ever since then. So it was the first and longest ongoing gig. And then we also started playing Monday nights at the Social Lounge and Tapas Bar, or Sazerac as old school Asheville people know it. And we played there every Monday with a trumpet player. And one time there was a singer who came and sat in with us, and Franklin showed up with that singer and said, I play in this band, Sirius B, and he's a cellist. And he was playing all the bass parts on cello. And he's like, I would love to have an actual bass player. He said, that sounds cool. So I checked them out and then joined the band. And that was about 10 years ago. And I've been in that band since. So that's been the longest ongoing thing. Throughout, since joining them, I did another project with Franklin called Upland Drive. And that was mostly his original material, some of mine, some covers. And it was cello, bass, and drums, basically. And then we'd have like guest artists. That was a neat thing. And then there was, and that was kind of, I guess you consider it like fusion, rock, funk, all sorts of different things.
Yeah, you brought your stand-up bass and an electric tonight because we don't know what we're getting into.
You never know, which is a beautiful thing. So then, yeah, and then there was an alt country band called Gold Rose that I was in for a little while. And meanwhile, Ollie's doing like freelance jazz gigs, weddings, events, stuff that you do, stuff you got to make money, got to work. And then I was in a band, a sort of like folk rock jam band called the Naughty G's. That was 4 or 5 years. And currently, still at Sirius B, there's a band out of Atlanta called the Jerry Garcia Band cover band that I'm playing with local drummer Jay Hoots, who's a phenomenal drummer. And the guitarist and the keyboardist are out of Atlanta. And that's a really fun band. I've really been enjoying playing with them. It's interesting because the Jerry Garcia Band was a cover band, right? They only played covers. So this is a cover band of a cover band.
But it's pretty meta.
Yeah, right. But it's cool because it helps your repertoire, because you're learning all these tunes that you would also play in other scenarios. Like there's Beatles tunes, there's Bob Dylan tunes, there's things like that. We're playing it in the style of the Jerry Garcia Band, but the chords are the same and they're basically the same tunes. So it's like also helping me in that kind of way. And we really stretch out. We do, classic like 18-minute versions of tunes and things like that. And that's super fun. And then as of the past year, I've been going to Greenville every week to a place called Blues Boulevard Jazz Club, and playing with this phenomenal guitarist. His name's Jorge Garcia. He's a Cuban-born guitarist. He moved to the States when he was young, like maybe 12 or something like that. And I've learned so much from him. He's a phenomenal guitarist. And I just recorded on his album recently. He's got this concept called crossover. And it's like jazz fusion arrangements of like Purple Haze and Black Dog and like tunes like that, classic rock tunes. So I was fortunate enough that he asked me to record on his album, his most recent album called Still Crossing. It's like the second of those crossover albums. And I play every week with him on Wednesdays. And then
where is that?
In Greenville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Greenville, South Carolina. So not too bad. Hour drive on a Wednesday.
You're dedicated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
the hour back has got to be tougher, maybe.
Depends on what the construction is doing on good old 26.
Yeah, that's sometimes rolling the dice.
Yeah, sometimes it's really nice because there's no one on the road and I can just kind of wind down from the gig and drive home. Sometimes the highway's closed and there's flashing lights everywhere, and it's kind of stressful that you have to pay attention that closely at like 1 a.m, But I mean, you should pay attention, I guess, when you drive, but you know what I mean.
No, not if you're winding down.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's like its own kind of paying attention. So yeah, and then so those are all the, apart from all the freelance stuff, that's all the sort of groups and things like that. And
that's a lot of ongoing stuff. I mean, it's almost like, well, I mean, that's every Wednesday you mentioned, and then you've got a couple of monthly gigs. Is that right?
Yeah.
Just to sum it up.
I mean, on average,
like the musical career.
On average, it's all changed since the pandemic. So before, I would say pre-pandemic, I was playing probably between 6 and 8 times a week. And I would say I'm back up to more like on average 4 times a week. But I think more quality gigs now, I've noticed that's been a change since the pandemic. I've noticed gigs have gone earlier. There's less like 2 a.m. gigs, and they tend to be a little bit better money-wise. A lot of the really low-paid places just cut music entirely, I'm sure for budgetary reasons or whatever, to get out of the pandemic. So there's less work, but a little bit better hours, a little bit better pay, which is kind of an interesting, I guess, kind of a silver lining from pandemic.
You've also, come a certain ways in the musical career too. You're probably not scrounging for the lowest paying gigs anymore. Yeah,
I'd like to think so. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'd like to hear your feelings on this too. Like for me, when I think about taking a gig or playing with somebody, I balance the artistic investment versus the financial investment. Is it going to be musically interesting, something I enjoy doing, and I feel like I'm going to learn a lot, become a better player, be challenged, have to work for it, all of that stuff, versus how much money I'm getting paid. And ideally, both of those things check the box. You're making good money and you feel like you're getting paid for your time, and is musically rewarding, you're playing with good players, things like that. But, we've all had to take you're going to essentially be the jukebox for 2 hours and play things that you otherwise, we can usually make everything good by having fun and playing with good people, but sometimes it's, less desirable set list. And, or it's super desirable and pays junk, So yeah. I don't know. So that's like, for me, those are like the two sort of things. And I think, as I've played for a while now around town, like about 10 years, like, I guess I'm a little more choosy with what I do. I think the artistic integrity has a huge part of it for me. that's not to say all wedding bands are bad or anything like that, because I've had great wedding experiences. But playing the same thing every night or every week or something like that just doesn't really interest me. I want to be musically excited and fulfilled when I play. And I want the players around me to want to be there and feel very happy and the same kind of thing, and not jaded. I think that's the worst thing for me, is to play with someone who's jaded.
It's an awful experience, especially if you're okay with the gig.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been jaded. Maybe I've been the jaded one too. I think we've probably been there as well. But
yeah. Try to keep yourself in check. But sometimes if it's 2 a.m. and someone's had too many and they fall over your gear or something like that, it's hard not to.
That kind of jaded is bad.
Yeah. But I don't know. What do you, when you're thinking about playing music for a job, what do you consider?
Yeah, I was pretty hardline on it for a while, and just pushing harder and harder to just make sure that I was getting paid what I felt was fair, no matter what, which for me meant taking over a lot of the managerial work and trying to escape from music management companies. Some of them pay better than others, and again, like you said about wedding bands, I mean, great people, a lot of musicians don't want to deal with that stuff, and so I spent a lot of work trying to get those systems up and running. And luckily for me, I think playing classical guitar at weddings, even with some of that popular repertoire, is really fulfilling for me. Like, I can experiment while I'm playing. I'm sort of in my own little world about half the time. Or if I'm playing with a violinist and they're not jaded and having a bad time, then it's a really pleasant idea. Like it feels like high order and sophisticated, and I can make it as complex as I want. It's sort of a challenge. Whatever I'm playing is a challenge for me. It's like, how thick can I make those harmonies, and maybe using more inversions or like a walking bass, or trying to make it more challenging for myself. But I've also, over the past couple of years, like, been prioritizing like a health routine and like working out, like doing a lot of stuff in the morning, making sure that just my solo practice is in line and stuff. And so for me, it's a big challenge to want to go play out any 2 a.m. gigs, or any rock gigs or any open mics. But I'm like coming around, and I want to do, that's part of what this live stream is about, is trying to get like a fun musical project. I've got part of that routine is working on like an album that I've just been pouring dozens and dozens of hours into. So that's fulfilling for me, but it's sort of a big regret, or like a sort of a lack in my musical career, to be playing cool, fun rock funk stuff with a group, just because it's never quite paid, and I needed to prioritize other things.
Right. It's interesting too. Like, the one thing that's different. So as you mentioned, like upright bass, electric bass is my main thing, but I play some other instruments, but the solo gig thing is just not part of my world in general. I've done some solo piano stuff, but in general, I don't do solo gigs. And, so that sort of ability to challenge yourself and make, keep yourself interested with the music is like a whole nother sort of skill that I think solo musicians almost have to have, because you're playing 3-hour, 4-hour gigs with nobody else. And especially if it's the same rep, then, of course we don't want to get bored of it or anything like that. So that's because for me, the ultimate has always been playing music with other people. That's just my favorite thing. When I was in 6th grade, I had my first band, playing bass I did like trombone in elementary school before that, but I had my first band playing bass in 6th grade and like started to sort of like play concerts. You know, we played like Blink-182 songs and stuff like that. We thought we were so
nice.
cool, you know.
And now you're full circle. You're teaching
Blink-182 songs to 6th graders. That's actually true.
You run one of the just to say it explicitly, you run one of the rock bands, student rock bands at Asheville Music School.
I do, and actually,
and they're loud because I teach in the studio right above.
Oh, nice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's awful. No, I rented out the next studio across the hall to escape, but man, it was brutal.
That's funny.
Yeah, they are great though. Yeah.
They're doing a great job, man. They're really awesome. Are. They've improved so much in such a short time. You know.
So was your band that good? Did you have a good leader like you? Well, or did you guys just do it?
We didn't have really a good leader, but we were so into it. You know, I'd have to listen back. I felt like we were, you know, really good because we were playing, you know, Red Hot Chili Peppers and Blink-182 as a trio in 6th grade, and I was like, you know, we were it. We were the only band in town doing that. This is in Connecticut, Southington, Connecticut, where I grew up, and you know, it was like we'd play a little gig, and the other band would be a bunch of like 40, 50-year-olds, and we're like 12, you know, so we thought we were really good, and we were told we were good. Whether we were or not, I don't know. I'd have to find some old like cassette recording that I did on my like Walkman or something from back then. But
nah, if you're gigging around, I mean, you're good, you know,
good enough,
like a relative,
good enough that people aren't running away from you when you're playing. Like, and I feel like when you're in middle school, you're past the like, oh, they're cute for doing it. Like elementary kids get away with that because they're cute just for holding their instruments. But when you're in middle school and you have loud amplifiers and stuff, you have to be decent enough, I guess.
Yeah,
you
know.
True. Funny little thing about that band. So that I'm teaching now. They just played their second gig on Sunday. And so they played Black Sabbath, Metallica, Steely Dan. What else did they do? Black Sabbath, Metallica, Steely Dan, The Doors. And it was like, and the director of the school, he was like, that is like a playlist from everything I listened to when I was your age to the kids. And it totally is for me too. And it was just so funny to hear these kids playing. I mean, they played War Pigs. Like, that's cool, you know? But it's like totally.
Did you guys do the cake? Andy's
band is doing the cake. Well, it's funny. So the cake version has that cool bass line in it. And it's like 3.5 minutes long, 4 minutes long. And it's a great version, right? And the trumpet's playing the melody at the end and stuff. The Black Sabbath version is like 7 minutes long.
Yeah,
it's like
a huge epic song.
It's totally epic, and these kids are doing the whole thing straight through, which is like super cool, and they're super into it. So, that's funny. I guess I never thought about the like I was in a band when I was, because they're in like 8th, 9th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. But yeah, it's like they're we didn't have the school that was offering that though. That's cool that they have that. Asheville's a good community, man. There's a lot of great musicians and great educators around here, and
a lot of creative spaces.
That's right, but never enough.
Indeed. So
yeah,
you were saying that formative experience like really made the social aspect of music sort of primary for you.
Yeah. So yeah, right. Sorry, I went on a tangent. So
it's okay. I'm here to host.
Right. We're here to tangent together.
That's right.
Yeah. So I had that first band then, and, you know, started to get the experience of like playing with other musicians. And then right around 8th, 9th grade, I was like the nerdy kid listening to Mozart and listening to classical music and starting to get into like at the time what I called like real music, you know, not the stuff on the radio, but like the classical stuff. And then I heard Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I was like, what is this? You know, it was like fusion. I was like, this is crazy. And from there I sort of
heady stuff.
Yeah, heady stuff. stuff I didn't know. I literally didn't know was possible. You know, I'm like, you could do that, you know? And then from there, it sort of bridged over, and then I heard Kind of Blue, and I got into Miles, and I got into Coltrane, and like started my love of jazz. And that's been really, you know, if I think of like what I am best at or what I've played the longest, therefore feel the most natural at, is playing jazz. And when I started really getting into that, I just really got into the dialogue and the conversation that these musicians have with each other when they're playing. Improvised music, I guess, is really the thing. And, you know, it was like I was too young to really understand what I was hearing, but I know there was something happening. You know, it's like the piano player would hit this chord and the drummer would respond and, you know, whack, whatever. And it's like, it was exciting to me. I'd hear these things and I'm like, that's so cool. These guys are talking to, or these people are talking to each other. I'm like, I want to do that. I want to find other people, you know. So I started sort of getting into that improvisational thing, and I was getting into jazz. I was a little too, I didn't really quite have the chord theory and stuff to play it yet, but I was into it. So I had like a band in high school where I was playing guitar, and we were doing lots of like 2-chord jams, you know, very improvisational.
Get ready, everybody.
Yeah, right. It's gonna we're gonna
later.
2 chords if you're lucky. So, you know, I started really getting into that stuff and just really enjoying that. And then, you know, then I went to college, music education, but really studied a lot of jazz. And I went to college in Connecticut, and my professors were all adjuncts from New York City. So they're working jazz musicians in New York, which I was, you know, so lucky to study with and get that sort of real life thing. And I went down into New York City every chance that I get, and I just watched these monsters play, you know, probably for $50 pay or whatever, because it's a tough life in New York. But, you know, I'd go down and I'd see like Chris Potter on a Saturday playing with, you know, Jeff Ballard or something like that. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. This is incredible.
Yeah.
You know,
that's awesome. So did you ever move into the city?
No. I thought about it.
It's a tough life up there.
It is, you know, so I grew up in Connecticut. I went to the city a lot, and it seemed like when I was getting to the end of college, it was like go into the city, join the rat race and see what I can do, find a teaching job and start gigging, or get out of New England and go experience something. And that's what I chose. So I took a job on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. And that's like the middle of nowhere, man. It's, I'd never been west of the Mississippi up to this point in my life. And I graduated college and got this job, and I was like, all right, I guess this is where I'm going. And my dad and I drove out there. And if you ever, I don't know if you've ever been out there, but you drive through Colorado, you get into Utah, you're like, I am on Mars right now. It's a totally different world. Which, you know, I came to love, and I still do very much so, but
I've never made the drive, but I had a layover in Phoenix one time, and it was when like a giant dust storm was coming in.
Oh yeah.
And I was like everybody's like, it's the biggest one in forever. So like I was like, well, I gotta see it. So I walked outside of the airport, you know, and like I was so excited. And I thought like it was gonna be like an apocalyptic sort of movie, like with this giant cloud headed towards me. But no, it was just like a ton of sand in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and it's funny, like Phoenix is its own sort of thing, you know, because it's like this big city in the desert that really shouldn't exist because there's not enough water. But that's a whole nother thing. But
okay, yeah, so not relevant. It felt weird to me.
Irrelevant, but it's, you know, you're like in this low valley where it's hot and there's saguaro cactus and there's paved roads. Like that hardly existed where I lived, right? Like there was one paved road and everything else was dirt. Like we were way out there.
And you went for it.
Yeah, and I'm so happy I did. Those kids were amazing. Very like sarcastic, cynical sense of humor, which I really enjoy. They would give you a hard time every day, and I loved it. They pranked me and all that kind of stuff, but it was all out of love because they didn't, you know, there was no music teacher there, and I started a program there, and I know those kids appreciated it. You know, we had a really good sort of bond, which is really cool. And I did a lot of like rafting when I was out there, a lot of backpacking and all that kind of stuff because it's the best country for it, you know. But excuse me, it really is. Like, I drove the whole way, didn't see any tumbleweed until I got to the town I was moving into. Like, now we were in like Wild E. Coyote Roadrunner land, but yeah, gorgeous. So anyway, so I went for that track instead of going into New York City.
Yeah, and it sounds like, because what? Sorry.
That was the other option, is what it seems like to me. It's like, go to the city or move out to Mars. I'm like, I'll go to Mars.
Why not? And it sounds like you chased after, or like went for the teaching track more than like, were you still practicing, working your chops out there? With like dreaming of like escaping Mars?
Yeah.
Or like, how soon was it before you, or not how soon, but I'm sure at some point, did you transition into like, okay, I sort of need to move on to playing?
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's a couple things that sort of led to where I am now from there, thinking about it. So there was no gigs out there, right? Because again, we're like way out there. And the chops that I was practicing was more relevant to my students. So the second year I was out there, I started a concert band. So I was practicing every concert band instrument every day because I had to teach them those instruments. And, they're high schoolers, but only a couple of them really had any experience in playing any band instruments. So, every day I was practicing trumpet, practicing saxophone, clarinet, whatever it may be. Well, that was weird. So I didn't have too much of an outlet as far as actually playing and practicing for myself as a professional performer. And then also the other thing that happened when I moved out there, I had my bass, my upright with me, and I went to work one day. It's like all swamp coolers out there, and I had a humidifier because it's super dry out there. Right? It's a high desert.
What's a swamp cooler?
Swamp cooler is like it's a air conditioner that they use in the desert that like draws the moisture out of the air and cools the house. So it's like the desert version of an AC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never heard of that.
Yeah.
Like a moisture farmer.
Kind of, yeah. You don't see them like on the East Coast because there's too much moisture around here, but you see them out in the desert. Yeah, it's like their AC. But anyways, my dehumidifier one day went to school. My dehumidifier that I stupidly bought from Walmart, like, crapped out on me, and I came back and there was a huge crack in my bass. And
oh no.
Yeah, and the closest Walmart is 90 miles from where I lived, right? So it's because I said it's out there.
It's no Amazon yet.
Yeah, no, yeah. Definitely, especially not out there. They probably deliver now, but there was that was not an option. And like, if I'm going to get my bass repaired, the closest place I could have gone, I think, was Albuquerque, which would have been like about 6.5 hours. So of course I tried to self-repair it, and it kind of worked. But anyway, so I didn't really have my upright for a good while I was out there because it was broken. Then
tragic.
It was, man.
Yeah.
It was very tragic. So then I hooked up some friends, and we had this thing called the K-Town Ramblers. So Kijanka was the name of the town, K-Town. And every Thursday night, there was about 3 other teachers and myself would get together and play music. It would usually be like, I was playing guitar mostly, and it was whiskey-inspired versions of like country and folk songs, and the later it got, the more whiskey-inspired it got. And then the next day at work was always a fun day. But that was our Thursday night thing. So that was really like my outlet, was like more of like hanging around singing tunes with friends, than like, and then it was playing with the kids, that was the thing. So long way to answer your question, but that led to, there was 2 things that sort of led to me moving out of there and coming to Asheville. It was, I wanted to play more. I was missing that part of me. I mean, playing with the kids was amazing. Teaching them was amazing. Hanging out with friends and whatever. But like, I wasn't performing. I wasn't playing with professionals. I was that thing that interested me in music in the first place, of playing with other people and having that communication, I wasn't really fulfilling that, you know? So there was that. And then also, this was a time in my life where it's like, I was out there for 4 years. I was still in my 20s. And it was, you know, the only place I could live out there as a white person was on the school district, you know, because if you live on the reservation, you're either Native American, you're Navajo, or you're married into the family. And there was, you know, I think one other single eligible person that, you know, so that at the time that was a consideration. And I was like, this was going to be rough if that's going to be a priority for me at some point. So that was another consideration anyways. So, and then my parents in the meantime had moved down to Charleston, South Carolina. And my mom's like, you should check out this place, Asheville. It sounds pretty cool. So I applied to graduate school, got in Virginia, and moved in with my parents in Charleston, started graduate school over the summer, and because it was a summer program. And then by that September, I moved to Asheville and, you know, finished grad school 3 or 4 years later, which also was music ed. So I've got both undergrad and grad in music ed. And then, you know, I've been here since. And, you know, that thing about playing with other people that I've been sort of chasing that I love, it's grad school is where I learned how to define it. And it's the fact that you can't define it. So this is really cool. And I feel like as a fellow teacher, you would enjoy this. Bennett Reamer is teach music education, philosopher. He, one of the universities, it was in Chicago. I forget which one. I don't want to say it wrong, but one of the universities of Chicago is where he taught, and he taught PhD students. And he has the philosophy of music education. There's 3 editions. The first and the third are trash. The second is the most amazing book I've ever read. And he says it. He's like, those other 2 books suck. Read edition 2. So philosophy of music education, edition 2, Bennett Reamer. If you're a music teacher, read it. It's or just a music, or it's just philosophy of life. So what he describes,
lay it out.
Yeah. So what he describes as the thing with music. So he's talking about funding, trying to get a music ed program funded, and you, as a music teacher in a public school, which is what I had to do, he's like, you go to the board of the school and you beg for money. It's essentially what you have to do, because they want to give to all the sports teams, and you're like, well, instruments cost a bunch of money. We need money. So I had a guitar quartet. I would take them to board meetings to play for the board members, you know, and be like, look at what these kids are doing, blah, blah, blah. And inevitably you get the question of like, why do you need this money? Why is music ed important? Right. And we've talked, like, we know all these like somewhat superficial reasons of like, oh, it helps on test scores, it makes you smarter, stuff like that. Those are cool and fair enough, and there's some evidence and stuff like that, but it's not really a good answer. And what Reamer talks about is the hardest thing that you're trying to do is describe to somebody what they get out of music or art is something that is indescribable. That feeling of playing with somebody else and elevating to that next level of like, you know, it just gives you the goosebumps and like you just hit that thing that makes you feel amazing. You can't describe what that feels like to anybody. You can use terms like gives you goosebumps or feels amazing. Excuse me. But
it's sort of transcendent because you become more than yourself, like you said just now.
Right. Yeah. And you can, you know, some people liken it to it's a, you know, you're contacting a higher power, or you're transcending, but again, these are all analogies to describe this feeling that you're getting, and you get it from music. I'm sure there are other art forms people can experience that from. For me personally, I've reached that point luckily enough, several times when playing with other musicians, especially ones that are really good and you just connect with, where you reach that thing.
Yeah, sometimes you just feel panic.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you feel, boredom or jadedness,
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes there's a special alignment.
Yeah, and once you get there, that's like forever. You're like, that's what I want to do again. It's like trying to describe that to someone who hasn't felt that or been to that point is really. I mean, it happens even for people, even for listeners. This is why people chase around. This is why the Grateful Dead people chase them around for years and years. And now it's like Billy Strings, like his fans are chasing him around like crazy, and Fish fans, they chase around Fish for years and years because they've all been there and reached that place of transcendence. And, that means something different maybe for someone who's listening and someone who's playing, but it is this experience. And that is something that like lifts you to this place that you can't describe. And, so to be educated in music and understand music and listen to it and play it gives you the tools to sort of reach that spot, and so trying to explain this to a board.
I was about to say, so you tell the school board it's addictive.
Yeah.
It'll distract them. Once they can do that, they won't want to do anything else like science or math.
Right.
They're basically getting high on music.
Yeah.
So fund that.
Yeah. So fund my artistic drug. Yeah.
It is interesting. So what do you think is I like posing this question. Do you think like that music is just mankind's ultimate hobby? Sometimes it feels like that to me. Like it's like a game,
It can be
sort of like a sport, but it's not competitive. It's like a sport that's not competitive. Right?
I mean, I guess, one of the best and worst things about art or anything is it is what you make of it, so for me, it's not competitive. Like
I guess it can be for other people.
For some people it is, and that gets them, that motivates them and gets them to that place, and that's fine. I think inherently it's when you're trying to create dialogue with somebody to be competitive about trying to be better than them, that seems counterintuitive to me, but that's not in my nature. So it's just hard for me to understand. But is it the ultimate hobby? So, I mean, that really beckons a question, not to go like way out there, but that beckons the question, like, is everything,
what is a hobby?
Yeah. I mean, a car is something that's very utilitarian and useful, but that's also the ultimate hobby for many people.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially around here. There's a lot of, as Steve Alford used to call it, Appalachian lawn art of passed away cars and sticking half out of people's lawns. But yeah, I mean, I guess it can be, or, some people might, if you called it a hobby to them, then they would think that that's offensive because they've spent their whole life at it,
Yeah. Or I think some people too, or, now I've talked to like 60 musicians on this show. And it's so nice to get to know people so much more in depth. I'm learning so much that I didn't know about you.
It is cool.
And it's nice to, now I can categorize everybody and pit them against each other. No. For like, it's interesting to draw these contrasts, For you, it's a very social thing. For some people, like me, I think I'm more about like tinkering. I love just like tinkering and making something,
scientist.
The sort of creative part of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like a spiritual endeavor. It's like a thing that tethers one to a sense of identity or like, their role in the community or just like reality in general,
Yeah.
Like I find that my practice routine in the morning when I'm alone is very meditative and grounding.
Yeah. And I think, for me too, like, don't get me wrong, like I love to practice. I don't get to do it enough. But I really thoroughly enjoy it. And, and I agree with you. I think like finding, especially with the upright bass, all that wood vibrating when you play with the bow, like, and just droning strings and things like that. I mean, that's such a meditative thing. And it really does sort of put you in that mode, and you can kind of check out to it in a beautiful way. But, and I love to compose. I've written a lot of music. I've composed a lot of music, I should say. I'm not much of a songwriter. I don't really write lyrics so much, but I'm a composer.
That's what's taken me forever with the album.
Yeah.
It's
hard.
It's painstaking. Yeah.
It's hard. It's just, I've come to, I think, I don't want to say accept, because I probably could do it if I worked at it really hard, but I just haven't really worked at it really hard. And I've just come to realize that, like, it's not my forte. Is like, it's just not something that I really do, of like songwriting, like lyric writing. But there are people that are so good at it that I would rather collaborate with them and just know that this is something I could continue to get better at. But you're better at this than me, so we're gonna do this together, But so I love finding those creative spaces on my own. But I think that the thing for me is like the ultimate is, because eventually that composition is going to get played by musicians, or I'm going to be able to play that with somebody, and like practicing this thing, whatever it may be, feels so good. It's so fun to practice, because I'm going to then go be able to play it with a band who's also practiced it. And we're going to, the other thing too, and like, I got to give you credit for this. It's like playing a sonata or a concerto or so, something like that. It takes so much work to get those things down, man.
Yeah, I can't say that I've like memorized a gigantic work like that yet. Yeah. I'm working on the 4th cello suite by Bach, and I'm like pretty much done with the 2nd movement out of like 5. And so
is that what key is that one?
A while. I don't know. I played an A.
Are you playing an A?
But
you know what
so I'm not sure what the original is. D maybe.
See, if Franklin Keel was here, he would be like, "It's this one," and he knows all those by.
I know, he described them as skeletal, which I really like that adjective.
Yeah, I can see that. A lot of Baroque music kind of is skeletal, even in the way you're supposed to play it. You're supposed to play it like real flat, no vibrato and stuff like that, and like, it is. I can see that's interesting, and also like the way you can hear the chords through the single lines in that. I mean, talk about a masterful piece of work. Everything he did was incredible.
Yeah.
I've been I have a student working on a couple of the inventions, and those, it's so funny. The A minor invention, right? If you take that whole piece and you look at both parts, the right and the left hand, and you look at the rhythm, there's a note on every single 16th of the entire, I guess it's like 42 seconds, it's short, but the entire piece is just the whole time. And because I always do that, rhythm is always the hardest thing for kids to really read. Yeah, for any of us, I think rhythm's harder to read than pitch. So I always like, well, let's take the pitch out and just look at the rhythm. And when you're looking at 2 lines, like for both hands, the composite rhythm, so like the rhythm of both of them combined, and we looked at it, and it's just, I'm like, oh, wow, that's actually not that bad. But in doing that, he just weaves those 2 hands together to create those 2 lines that work back and forth. And it's like, you could hear the harmony between the single notes, and like the 2 lines and the melody and the counterpoint, stuff like that. It's just like, it's such a cool piece of work. And
it's so awesome. Yeah. And often the harmony is doing something. Like when one hand's playing like an 8th note and the other one's playing a 16th note, it's a suspension falling to a resolution. But then the very next thing is like something that is resolved going to a suspension that then is going to resolve on the next beat one.
Tension, release.
And
tension, release.
Or like tension, release, tension, release, release. So.
You're playing with my heart, Bach. Yeah. That's
so exciting.
Yeah, it's so good stuff. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, I think one of the things that I was sort of missing, and just think, I haven't really thought about this before, but one of the things that I really love and enjoy that, I wasn't quite as much getting into Arizona was like, I think music's exciting. I think it's very exciting. And I love talking to people who think it's exciting, and I mean, I probably appear like this huge extrovert, super social, and I'm not always like that, but I love to talk. I love to nerd out about music. I love to talk about music. I love to play music. I love to listen to music, all that stuff. And, to be able to talk about a Bach convention and someone know what I'm talking about was not something I could do out there,
Right, yeah.
Or it was someone who had listened to it because they had that Bach CD that they got from their mom, and they just always played it, and they're like, "Oh, I know that tune or that piece or whatever," which is great, which is wonderful about that. It's probably as valid and as in depth as an experience for them as it is for me. They could probably listen to it a lot easier than I can, because it's hard for me to listen to something and just listen to it. It's like, but it's funny because there's a lot of people. Curious, as a guitar teacher, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Like, there's a lot of people that think learning music theory can ruin certain people's experience as far as writing and listening. And for me, it's far enhanced it. I think I have the ability to just sit down and listen, so enjoy it, obviously, but like, it's tool theory for me is tools in my bag to further understand what the artist is trying to communicate to me. And then if I'm trying to write something or compose something, there's still the element of throwing all that stuff out the window and coming across something, you fiddle around and you're like, oh, I like that thing. And then your theory kicks on. You're like, okay, well, that's this thing. And now I could write it down, and now it's logged, and I can mess with it, but I've noticed like some songwriters, have said they don't want to learn music theory because because they think it's gonna make them, it's gonna get in the way of their writing.
That is interesting. Like, if we were to be generous to that thought for a moment, right? Like, perhaps this person does have some sort of natural proclivity or like talent, like having been perhaps exposed to music since a very young age, and maybe it's like a completely natural thing. But I think more often somebody's like, hey, really listen to this part, like I like this music, when they're very young, or so they get into the idea of listening to music, and there's like a certain acquisition of memory skills, and adapting of all these influences. I think maybe a misconception of some of these people that I would go out on a limb and disagree with is that their personal power for creativity is being dampened by music theory.
Yeah.
But it could, I think, maybe get in the way of channeling all of those influences that they've like banked. And then if you're getting into theory, I think often that involves listening to classical or jazz and exposing yourself to all of these sort of influences of even just these new sounds of different scales that aren't used in popular music. So like if they've got all Stone Temple Pilots and Tool or whatever, and then you start putting in like this sort of higher order stuff into that, it could corrupt that influence a little bit.
Yeah, which is an interesting thing, because it's like, I guess it depends your dedication to stick with it too, because I guess that does sort of happen. Just thinking about, for me, having been playing for quite a while now. Again, first band 6th grade, right? And as I learned theory and started learning more of like, asking like, why does this sound this way, or what's going on? I guess, for a time it was hard for me to not want to overanalyze and overthink things. Also I'm a Virgo, so that happens. But, that aside, I do think, that there was being able to just shut my brain off and enjoy something for what it was for a while was tough. But to me as a musician, it's because I was immature as a musician. I was ambitious, wanting to learn everything, but I was also like, I want to go as fast as possible. I want to know everything I can know. I want to be able to do all this impressive stuff. I want to be the rock star. I want to, it's like.
Did you ever go through this phase? I always had like this for, I don't know when in my development, but I was like, this music theory, like something has to break at some point. Like what's this new chord? I'm going to find this new chord that doesn't fit into the thing. I have students try to do that to me too. Like,
oh, totally.
There's not a name for this chord, and then you can just like analyze it,
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, I mean, I think like big part of learning theory is there's like, to me, there's plateaus. It's like same with learning an instrument or just music in general, I guess. Maybe all of art, like,
all life.
All of life, right? You feel like you're progressing, and then you hit this spot where you're like, oh, I thought I understood that. Now I don't, now I'm like, I can't, I just feel like I'm not getting any better learning anything new. And then all of a sudden, like a light bulb goes on and you're like, oh, it all makes sense. And then you're here again and you feel like you're doing this at sometimes. And then you listen to yourself when you were down here and you're like, okay, at least I have gotten better, But it is kind of like that journey, which I think is a cool thing. It's the journey of learning or whatever, the journey of life. But, it is sort of that. And I think in those sort of plateaus when we feel like we're stuck, that's sort of where you're like, you get into those, like, students will get into that, like, I think there's an unwillingness to learn sometimes. We're getting in our own way. And it's like, or you start making up this like, well, I don't need to know what that is. And it's like, part of that is correct. Sure, you don't need to know what it is to play it. But now that's like that is the only time you're going to play that way. But if you understand what that is and you know what that is, you're going to realize that thing happens 3 million other places and you're going to be able to always oh, that's that thing, But, yeah.
Can I ask you, when was the last time you took a lesson?
Actually, I've made it a pretty big point in my I don't know, adult life to make sure I do take lessons every now and then. So the January or February, recently.
Oh yeah,
nice. Elon JD, who's an amazing bass player, lives down in Hickory. He plays with Jonathan Scales, and he's a local dude. He'll play down at the Foundry sometimes. He's an electric player. He's got the most amazing groove and time I've ever heard, and he seems like just this very centered human being. And he put up and I was like, man, I would love to take lessons from that guy when I was watching him play once. And he put up a post on Facebook saying like, oh, I'm home, I could do lessons. And then my wife bought me 3 lessons from him because
nice.
He put it up. I was like, around Christmas time, and I jokingly said to her, I was like, yeah, this is what you get for Christmas. And then she did. And so I've actually had 2 lessons with him. And 90% of the lessons are just us chatting. He's shown me some really cool things, but it's, as one musician to the other, he's like, I don't know why you're doing this. You know more than I do. I'm like, no. That's not like, you know more about what I don't know, and it's like, so there was a lot of picking brains, and he's an amazing guy. So recently, before that, there was a pretty big gap. The last lesson I took was from Elliot Wadopian, before he passed away. And that was an amazing lesson. That was a hour lesson that lasted for 2.5 hours. And, he was an incredible person. And that was an upright lesson. So the thing that I think I've learned that I've come to, just to kind of like full circle that theory conversation, a lot of the guys and girls that have said to me, about the, learning theory will get in your way thing. A lot of them tend to be, singer-songwriters, or, folk or country musicians, 3 chords in the truth kind of music. And I admittedly, when I was going through this process of wanting to learn everything and understand all this stuff, like, I didn't listen to that music because it's like, oh, it's 3 chords, it's simple. I listen to that music now. I love it. I do. Because it's the way, really what it came down to is my bass teacher in college told me this, and I never understood it until more recently, It's the way something's played. It's not what's played, it's how it's played. And some people, like, Willie Nelson could play a G chord and make you cry, and somebody else can play that same G chord and say nothing. There's just something, some people, it comes back to that thing of you can't describe what it is, but there's just something that some people have that when they play, for some reason, it says something. And that, theoretically, I understand what a G chord is. I know the hertz of those notes, the combination tones. That I've nerded the crap out of what a G chord is.
You know all the hertz of all the notes in it?
Practically. I mean, I've gotten there. Yeah, I've gotten there. And, and like how it works with the overtones and why it sounds so pleasant, why a major chord sounds the way it does, and how it's technically a little bit out of tune on a fixed pitch instrument, all that crap. And that has allowed me to enjoy more when I hear a string quartet playing a G chord and they're able to sharp their third just a little bit. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like all the feels, and I can hear that and I understand that. So it has heightened my experience. But also, like, Townes Van Zandt, Willie Nelson, some of those, like, when they play their guitars that's slightly out of tune and it sounds a little, but there's something about the way they play it just makes you, like, want to bawl. It's like that hasn't been stripped away from me, And, I mean, I guess it, through the process, maybe was because I was so into that's that chord. That's that chord. That goes to that chord. That's that, it's just so into that, and then I guess as you mature, that you can hold on to that, but you can also focus on how something's being played and what is being said. Because ultimately, I guess that's really what matters is how this stuff is coming out, how it's being communicated and how it's being said. And,
Yeah, you gotta have style. And it consists of both living a life and practice and like dedicating time on that instrument and utilizing some vocabulary of something. And theory can give you more of that vocabulary. But I'll admit I'm stumped in some of those lessons when I have, and you asked about guitar players specifically, because some guitar players will come to me for lessons and just want to be able to strum chords. And I'm somewhat at a loss of like, well, if you want to just learn how to play chords, you just have to play a chord over and over. Like you just have to play G a zillion times.
Yeah. Repetition.
Yeah. I can tell you what notes are in that G.
Right.
But they don't want to really know that. They just need to, they're like, how do I play this G faster?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, then we're going to sit here and play this G 50 times.
Right. We're going to play it slower so you can play it faster.
Yeah. Slowing down.
It's the, Adam Neely was repetition legitimizes. It's a hard word to say. And it's true. You do have to do things over and over to learn them. But, for me, if they're kids, to go back to like that Bennett Reamer book, another thing he talks about is the job of a music educator is to create a positive emotional experience for the music student.
Yeah.
I can't remember. That's word for word. I can't believe I remembered that. But, so for me,
the master's degree is paying off.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's good.
For me, if a kid comes and he wants to just learn Metallica songs or just learn Nirvana songs and he won't do anything else, I'll teach him those songs. I'd rather teach him those songs than turn him away, because if that means if he's, 10, 12 years old and in 5-10 years, he says, oh, I took guitar lessons and I had a great time, then he'll have a positive experience with music and want to go, and eventually when he gets older and matures a little bit, he'll want to learn more because he wants to keep playing, because he can play at the time. He accomplished what he wanted to, even though we have to sacrifice there's so much other stuff I should be teaching you right now because I want to turn you into a good guitar player. If we sacrifice a little bit of that and focus on you're having fun and enjoying this So that means in 5 years, you're probably still going to do this for yourself because, you know, the reality is most kids that we teach are not going to become professional musicians, just as they're not going to become professional soccer players or whatever else they're doing at this age.
Yeah, it's hard to recommend it, actually.
Yes, it is. It is. Although you get to do cool stuff like this. But, you know, but if we remember, like, if we make it so that it's a good thing and positive, then that means they'll either continue with it or they'll go see music and get inspired in another way, or just keep music as a part of their life and have this positive experience. And you don't get because how many times has a parent told you, oh, I took piano lessons when I was a kid and I hated my teacher. He was such a so now I don't like music. It's like heartbreaking when I hear that. I'm like, you don't like music? What does that mean?
It's crazy, yeah.
And because somebody ruined it for them, you know? So to me, it's more important. Like, yeah, I do feel like I'm having to like stop myself as a teacher of saying like,
yeah, and exercise great patience to just often sit there, slow them down, and perceive many students one after another figure something out in front of you. But that can be a brilliant moment when they do figure something out.
It is.
There's like excitement.
Yeah. You know, the other thing that's good about a lot of music, especially for like guitar or piano or bass, some of the more less so the like wind instruments and stuff, but the ones that have a less of a learning curve. Like you can make a note on the piano without, you know, a baby can press the key, right? You don't have to there's not like all this physical effort to play it. The good thing about those instruments is that like there is enough repertoire, enough pop music, rock music that's simple enough that we can derive lessons out of those to teach the same thing that, you know, how Leonard Book 1 is. You know, you could teach a C and an F using Smells Like Teen Spirit. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, so it's like there is a lot more resources to stay an age where we can, especially with YouTube and all that stuff. It's like we can do something that seems more exciting than like just play number 1, number 2 out of the book or whatever.
Yeah, have you ever thought about making your own book? I fantasize about it, but it's like,
I do
where's
too.
the time?
I know. I started to write a theory book.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I've got a list going of like all the exercises I would have to write out.
Yeah. I thought about writing a theory book, and I started tackling certain topics, but I think I maybe wrote 10 pages or something like that, and it's sort of stayed there since. I still have like all the ideas because it's just how I teach it anyways. And, you know, I still fantasize about it. I think it'd be cool. Maybe I'll do it someday.
I did want to note, I've been doing a lot of work of like trying to marry these ideas in my life that are hard to put together. This like push-pull of like drive and ambition and survival and like growth even. And like the mental health of like feeling peace and acceptance and like, you know, this is okay, and like forgiveness and self-care. Yeah. And I think that kids get bombarded with the former quite a lot in class and grades and you know, social structure of the school. And a lot of my students, their schedules are packed, you know, with so much stuff that they like have to do, these obligations, and these little tiny moments of making a zillion mistakes and it being okay. Like if you're offering that positive emotional environment, that I think has like therapeutic value.
Oh, big time.
You know, or like just sort of, because that's a skill that we all have to build with life, is to like just sort of be okay with mistakes or like not being good at something.
Yeah, and be okay with ourselves for a little bit. You know, I mean, granted, there are a lot of different educational environments in Asheville, which is such a beautiful thing. But, you know, I mean, kids are told what to do and how to do it all the time, you know, and when they get to their music lesson, it's almost like they're expecting the same thing. And it's like, I guess there is a little bit of that, you know, because you have to tell them, put your finger here or whatever, but
say practice.
Yeah. But, you know, you also like, it's great. Like sometimes I have a couple young drum students, like really young, and sometimes they just sit down and they're just like, and they just go like, wow, and they need to make noise and let it out for like a minute, and their eyes are, and like they look better, like
yeah,
phew, and it's like, yeah, it's a 30-minute lesson and they're paying money for it, but to me, 2 minutes of letting them be themselves at an instrument is like so worth that 2 minutes of non-instruction time or 3 minutes or whatever it is. Because I mean, they just, again, maybe a little bit different around here because there's so many different environments, but I feel like from what I've observed, there are plenty of kids that otherwise don't have that opportunity, to just sit down and be themselves and make noise for a minute. And like, I mean, from the look on their face, it's like, you don't really do this much through your other things, do you? In school or whatever. And again, not knocking any schools around here because there's some great schools, but I think we get to provide that, and more so in private lessons than you do in the classroom. I taught when I was teaching in Arizona. I was teaching high school, and I had 200 kids every day. I'd see, not in one class, obviously, but it's hard to provide. I would still try to a little bit, but it's hard to provide that same environment for 60 kids at a time compared to one. It's and I like that part about private teaching. I liked that I got to teach 200 kids every day, and hopefully enrich them in one way or another, and reach that many kids. But there are things you could do in private lessons that you can't do with a room of 60, So, and that's a whole nother thing, man.
That is.
Could go on and on.
And we're pretty much, we're actually overtime. So
that happens. My bad.
No, I always feel like we're just scratching the surface.
I know.
You like loosen up. An hour sort of seemed when I first started this, everybody's like, you're doing 2 hours? That's way too long, But I feel like, I don't know, there's so much more to get into the nuance of teaching. We didn't even talk so much about, you talked about loving to perform, but like, yeah, that dialogue, and I guess we'll talk. We'll say things to each other musically here in a minute.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to plug? I think this will come out the first or second week of April.
The first or second week of April. April 14th at Deerfields. I think it's the Carolina Jam Festival, I think it was what it's called. I'm playing with the Jerry Garcia Band cover band. That's going to be a really cool, fun gig. And then after that, I'm kind of going quiet for a little bit because I'm having a little girl.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, that's going to happen early May. So I'm going to be kind of home for a little while.
Priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's great. I think we're both going to be able to just be home for like a month and not have to work and just be with her. So that's going to be amazing. But, I think that's the I left it over there. That's the best, the big April one I could think of is that I'm pretty sure it's called Carolina Mountain Jam, but it's April 14th and 15th. I play on the 14th. Right after us is the Tuesday Night Funk Jam Band. And then, which will be great. And then on Saturday, the headliner, I think, is Jeff Sipes Electric Trio or whatever he's calling it. And Jeff Sipes is awesome. He's a drummer in Brevard. He used to play with O'Teal with the Aquatic Rescue Unit back in the day. That was an amazing group. And then this is first. So after this, so in the past, I would have played at St. Patrick's Day at Jack of the Wood with Sirius B.
I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yeah,
or will have been.
I'm sure it was great. That's a late night one, so we'll see.
Late night on St. Patty's Day, right downtown.
Yeah, at the only pub downtown. So,
Oh man,
woo!
It's gonna be fun.
That'll be fun.
Maybe I'll stop in.
Yeah.
I went out for St. Patty's Day last year, and I don't think things had heated back up quite yet.
I'm kind of hoping they're not fully heated, because late night at Jackwood fully heated can be interesting. But I'm sure it'll be a great time. You know, St. Patrick's Day was the first virtual gig that I played in 2020.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, because I think it was like the Sunday before St. Patrick's Day was my last gig in person. And then I was set to play at Pisgah Brewing on St. Patrick's Day, and then we ended up doing that virtual. And then, then they all went away.
Well, they're coming back.
They are coming back.
They're coming back.
They're coming back.
And so are we after a short break.
Right.
I think by the time this airs, maybe I'll have a Patreon set up. And if I do, or check back in a little later, maybe if you enjoy the show, contribute to that. I'm sure there will be goodies that each tier has. Irvin Music Studio on Patreon. And I think that's pretty much the thing that I'm going to be plugging for the next year. 2 years.
Yeah. Support it, because this stuff costs a lot of money.
That's
true. To be very frank about it.
It does, and especially cables, man.
Cables.
All right.
Well,
Well, yeah. Thanks again. We'll edit it right here because there's no engineer.
We did jazz. We jazzed.
Yeah.
Cool,
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Couple more?
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
Or two. We started. We got a late start. But
Yeah.
let me know if you want to.
Just do like one or two more, and then we should probably call it.
Totally. Perfect.
Yeah, maybe one more. Later than I thought.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Then let's vamp it up. Let's forget standards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now let's do, I don't know, something freeform.
Okay.
Get into it. I don't know.
Sure.
Do you have a key?
Good.
You don't have to.
I don't know, like a